Sorry, Han, but I'm gonna tell you the odds. So normally today would have been my Westworld review, but I am on the night that I am recording this, instead of the Westworld review to put out on Monday, I'm gonna be up late on some other projects, and I'm not gonna get to Westworld until tomorrow, so that'll be Tuesday. So instead, I'm gonna take what I had originally planned to be the Tuesday slot. God, this is off to a good start. Tuesday slot, and put it here, and which is that I want to talk about what Solo means for the future of the Star Wars franchise. Now, originally when I was conceiving this as a concept, I thought it was mainly just going to be talking about what it meant as far as what it indicates for narrative things and what it indicates about how Lucasfilm is processing these and what my thoughts on whether or not it gave me hope for the other projects from a strictly storytelling perspective. I am still going to talk about that, but I'm also going to have to bring in the box office because it turned out to not be what it was supposed to be. Projections for this thing had it as high as 150 million for its opening weekend. As of today, this is Sunday, when they can pretty safely wrap up the 3-day estimate, it's coming in at 83 million. That's low. That's especially low compared to its what was expected of it. Now, yes, I understand this is in fact a 3-day weekend with Memorial Day, but even on a 3-day weekend, even when they pad out the stats with that, Friday and Saturday are still the big days. And it didn't do great on the big days. So yes, if you choose to count Memorial Day, that will bring it up a little bit, but looking at it as a standard weekend, which ultimately is how it's generally going to be judged, this is not good. And it flat out flopped in China and opened soft in a lot of other overseas markets. So, oh boy, yeah. I remember saying after The Last Jedi that there might have been some scrambling after that second weekend had a really big drop. But this isn't just a big drop, this is a bad open. And that is a whole new can of worms for Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy to be dealing with. Now, I will say that it is possible that for whatever reason, this is just a weird weekend, because also Deadpool like plummeted over 70%, like way more than what I would have thought would have done for a perfectly fine movie that opened well. So maybe there's just something weird going on with this weekend, but regardless of any external reason, on paper, this is bad. This is still really bad. So if you want a comparison so that I'm not just throwing a number out with no context, I'm not even, you know what? I almost was going to compare it to The Last Jedi's opening. Let's not even go there, because the main saga entries always do better. I say always, this is only our second spin-off. The context is all weird on this. Okay, let's compare it to Rogue One instead. Rogue One, which is the other sidequel, that opened at 155 million. So this is way, 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 way behind that. But if you want another point of comparison, this is the first Star Wars movie to open in summer as opposed to in December since Revenge of the Sith back in 2005. And that opened at 105 million. So a movie that was the closing episode in a trilogy that a lot of people weren't liking 13 years ago opened better than Solo did. Yeah. I don't know how secure Kathleen Kennedy's got to be feeling at this point, because she is going to bear a fair amount of the blame for this, because we don't know. And and when I say we, I mean audience members. We don't know, and we will probably never know exactly what it was Lord and Miller were getting up to and whether or not it was any good. Honestly, it could have been way worse than the movie. And honestly, if you didn't see my review, Solo is not bad. Solo's fine. It's just kind of unremarkable. That might be part of the problem, but I'll come back to that. So she got involved because she took Lord Miller out. She got Ron Howard in, and this was on her authority. This was on her say-so. And I have to imagine that people above her, the people actually at Disney, with control over things even higher than her power reaches, have to be looking at this looking at the very divided reaction to The Last Jedi, looking at the reception to Rogue One, which was decent, but it seems to be getting beaten up in retrospect. So does Force Awakens, for that matter. And they have to be going, are we steering this ship wrong? Now, for my money, Episode 9 is going to be largely unaffected by this. Episode 9 still happens because they have to make Episode 9. What may be more of a question, I would put the big question mark right now over Rian Johnson's proposed trilogy, because, and this is me assuming a little bit, but my assumption has been that he got that gig getting to do a trilogy of films not as part of the main series, basically on the strength of how good his working relationship with Kathleen Kennedy was and how much she liked his pitch. But you really have to think that her judgment has got to be called into question at this point with what has gone on in both the production and now the diminished box offices of these last few films. And when I said that Solo was just fine, that honestly could be part of the problem, because I think, look, it's really hard for us to truly properly gauge exactly what percentage-ish of fans of Star Wars really didn't like The Last Jedi. It's hard to judge because the people who didn't like it really didn't like it and are extremely vocal about it, and it makes them seem louder than their numbers might in fact be. It's difficult to judge. I do believe it to be a significant portion of the audience, though. And I don't think it goes so far as people coming out of The Last Jedi going, I'm never watching anything Star Wars again. But I do think there was probably a fair number of people who either didn't like The Last Jedi or have been nervous about the franchise going forward, who came out and went, you know what, if Solo doesn't look spectacular, I might just skip it. And when the reviews came out and said, yeah, it's fine, it's good, it's fun, and which was my reaction more or less, I have to imagine there's a fair amount of the audience that went, yeah, I'll wait for streaming. Because this is the first Star Wars film that I can remember where, or at least since the prequels, where there isn't at least somebody I know going, oh, this was great, it was so much fun. You know, because regardless of my own feelings about them, I know people who love The Force Awakens. I know people who love The Last Jedi. I know people who love Rogue One. I don't know anybody who loves this. And actually, most of my friends who are like opening day Star Wars goes, I'm one of only 2 people I know that's actually seen this movie by now. That's not to say my other friends won't get to it, but I think Star Wars as a whole is not destination viewing anymore. They might be milking this to death, and the combination of having put out a film that's just fine, combined with the fact that one Star Wars movie a year frankly might be too much. And I still think it was a bad idea to release this in summer. I've always thought that. I don't know why they gave up the December release date, because they literally owned it. They owned that release date. I don't know. So that's sort of how the box office is shaking out. Yeah. Kathleen Kennedy has got to be really worried right now, and she's probably got a lot of uncomfortable meetings and awkward questions to be answered about how she's going to right the ship. Like I said, Episode 9 still happens. Rian Johnson's trilogy, possibly iffy. The Boba Fett movie, that probably still happens because there's enough fans, or at least there have been historically, who go, we love Boba Fett, that the studio will probably think that's a good idea regardless. Obi-Wan movie, assuming that they are still moving forward in that. We haven't heard anything in a while, but that probably still moves forward. But beyond that, I imagine things have to be very much up in the air at the moment. So that's the financial end of it. In terms of the narrative issues, or at least what the narrative and my feelings about the film, you know, what it says to me, here's why it makes me nervous now. I know a lot of people really like to blame Kathleen Kennedy for things that have gone on in the last couple of Star Wars movies. I would say disproportionately so, honestly, especially when it comes to The Last Jedi. If you're going to be mad at somebody, be mad at Rian Johnson. He made the movie. He wrote the movie. Kathleen Kennedy's not a creative. She's an executive. She exerts her influence, but she didn't come up with any of those ideas. Those were Rian Johnson's ideas. That said, she's not blameless. The way I put it was, I don't like a lot of what Rian Johnson did in that movie, and I don't want to rehash my issues with The Last Jedi. I'll simply reiterate they're not what a lot of people have. I don't have, the problems with Rey getting her powers, or a lot of or what was done with Luke. Those aren't problems that I actually have with that film, but I still don't like it. But the thing is even though I said, despite my issues, I don't necessarily blame Rian Johnson for making them, because that was the movie he wanted to make. I do kind of blame Kathleen Kennedy as the overseer for allowing him to do it. Like, I get why he might have thought these were good ideas. I just don't understand how there weren't people above him looking at least some of these ideas and going, actually, we'd rather you didn't do that. That's potentially brand damaging. So that was the extent to which I was prepared to blame Kathleen Kennedy. I never actively blamed her for that movie. And Rogue One, I kind of shrugged off, because at the time it was a one-off. It was a fluke, essentially. But now, between Rogue One and Solo, we've got two movies with incredibly publicly troubled shooting and massive reshoots, and a lot of influence being exerted by her and the other Lucasfilm top brass at the tail end of production. And, well, first of all, that racks up the costs on these things, because you have to shoot a whole bunch more stuff. So it inherently makes these things already more expensive than they should have been in the first place. But beyond that, especially in the case of Solo, it really does bring into question her, I don't want to say her ability to run a studio, because that's a skill set I honestly don't know a ton about. But what it does bring into question is her ability to judge artistic quality, which honestly is something that you can call most studio executives' judgment into question on that. Actually, pretty much all of them. That's actually really standard. But the difference is most studio executives aren't overseeing a single franchise. And when a studio executive is basically in charge of only one thing, you'd like to think they have a decent grasp on a sense of what that thing being done well would look like. So, like, I mean, Kevin Feige is the golden boy of all this. The man somehow manages to run Marvel Studios, understand these characters, know what's going to work, know what's going to sell, and keep a very smooth operation going. He really does seem to be the complete exception to this, though. So what I mean by Solo brings Kathleen Kennedy's ability to judge artistic quality into question is this. The primary reason given for the removal of Lord and Miller, and I will grant there are very well might be other things, but this was the main reason given, so it's what I'm going to deal with, was that they were not sticking to the script. They were going off script way too much, and it was causing a tone issue, and it made the whole thing goofy. It made it not what they wanted, but they weren't sticking to the script. And Kathleen Kennedy really went to bat for the script by Lawrence and Jonathan Kasdan. And that means that script kind of needed to be phenomenal. Because if her basis for cutting loose the previous directors was their inability to stick to that script, but that script is just fine, it's what you'd expect, then that shows that she is coming at these from a headspace and an understanding of the material that might not be the best one. Because when I came out of Solo and I thought about that story, I thought about the script, and because I mentioned this in a previous video before, when you get Ron Howard to direct, Ron Howard, he's very much a journeyman director, and that can be used as a derogatory term sometimes, but he's a very good journeyman director. But what I mean by that is he doesn't reshape a script. he takes a script and he'll shoot it the way that he thinks it's best to be shot, but Ron Howard doesn't have a particularly distinct flavor. He's not an auteur. He's a guy who, you give him the script, he'll shoot the script. If you give him a really good script, he'll probably deliver a really good movie. But he can't really elevate a script. So when I look at story issues of this, I feel comfortable chalking them up to the script as opposed to saying it was Howard's fault for mishandling it. And this script is fine, but I look at the things, like, you try and suss out what possibly could have been in here that would have gotten an executive so excited, and I can see that stuff. Things like spoilers for Solo, for what I'm about to talk, so if you care, sorry, I gotta talk about this, but stuff like Darth Maul being dropped and clearly setting up, if not his own movie, at least for him to be a running threat in other side films. That kind of deliberate franchise synergy drop. Executives love that because they see that as franchise building. All the connections that are made that like an in excess of what is necessary to the story. Things, you know, it's not just a matter of Han getting the Millennium Falcon. We have to see him meet Chewie for the first time. We have to see the Kessel Run. We have to, for some reason, we have to explain why the Falcon's navicomputer is so good. I don't even know why, but for some reason that gets explained really bizarrely. We need to highlight how many capes Lando has. Like, all these things, this sort of really interlocking thing. Executives love that. It's why it's why it was said at the studio screening of Batman v Superman, the executives gave it a standing ovation. Of course they did. It set up at least 4 other films to follow itself. Of course they loved it. Those things, those connections, tying something to something that is already known to be loved, while at the same time blatantly, and in this case, I don't think especially well, setting up what will come next and what they can further build from, is exactly what executives look for. But of course, all that stuff kind of exists separate from whether or not the script and the story and the characters is actually any good. And again, I don't want to overbag on this script because it's not a bad script, but it's also not a phenomenal script. It's not a script worth upending a production over. And that is what is causing me to bring Kathleen Kennedy's artistic judgment into question. And that was something I was planning on touching on even before I looked at the box office. But now that, on top of the box office, if the folks at Disney are basically asking the same questions I am, do you actually know what you're looking for? And do you actually know how to deliver films that will make us money? And the answer to both those questions is, we're not so sure anymore. I wouldn't be shocked if there is a shuffling that goes on at Lucasfilm. Maybe because Episode 9, like I said, that's going to happen regardless. Maybe that will be, they'll let her stay on and have that be her Hail Mary play. See how well she handles whatever part she takes in the development of that. But if Episode 9 underperforms as well, and also to be fair, if Episode 9 underperforms, that will probably have more to do with people being upset from The Last Jedi, which at this point is not something she can control. You know, she could oversee the creation of a brilliant Episode 9, but if it tanks because fans are still annoyed, then it didn't matter how good she did. So, but if Episode 9 underperforms notably, I would be shocked if she's still there. So, I didn't mean to make this overly about one specific person. I don't like to do that, but she is the overseer. I mean, she's as relevant to this as Kevin Feige is to Marvel movies. So I feel like it as much as I don't like making it about one person, because if nothing else, it invites people in my comments section making a lot of personal attacks, and that's the kind of stuff I have to comb through and get rid of. But, you know, That's just the state we're in. The franchise as a whole, I really hope that they get off this one Star Wars movie a year kick. I think it was a bad idea, like overall, especially when we look at the stuff that they're starting to develop and are working on. Because look, Rogue One was an intriguing premise because it was honestly a completely new story. It was something we knew nothing about. Solo is a much more traditional prequel. It fills in the gaps pretty much as you would expect them to be filled, and that is harder to get excited about. And the frequency that these things are coming out, and also coming out with them once a year, you're going to start going with less and less great ideas, to be honest, because it's not like Marvel, who has 50 years of comic book history and stories and characters to draw from. You guys got to make this stuff up. I mean, you've got characters you can spin off and build from, but you don't have the same pool of stuff. And guys, don't cite me the expanded universe, because most of that stuff, even the stuff that was good, it was done in a way that was meant to work as a book or as a comic or as a video game, and a lot of that stuff doesn't translate. Elements do, bits do. That's why Thrawn showed up in Rebels, but especially since they have declared the expanded universe non-canon, and that's not to say they won't borrow from it. They can, they have, they will, they should. But they don't have the same base level of solid foundation to be pulling elements from. I think one a year was a bad idea. I think that we need to get episode 9, focus on that. Don't give us a Star Wars movie in 2020 and go to one every 2 years. Because if your main series is done, if the saga ends with episode 9, just give us a Star Wars movie every 2 years. Because I know you've got Johnson on a trilogy so that you can have him doing one every 2 years and then plugging in a Star Wars story in the alternating years. It's too much, guys. You have to back off. Go back to every 2 years. Build the anticipation again. Build the brand loyalty again. Help make Star Wars not seem like every other franchise again. Because that's what it's starting to feel like now. And that's where it's just gonna wither if you keep at it the way you're going. So those are my thoughts on the current state and future of the Star Wars franchise. What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, as long as they don't involve personal attacks. Seriously, guys, you can hate Kathleen Kennedy. I don't care. Just don't do the personal attacks thing, okay? But aside from that, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's also the stuff to do. You know the stuff. The like and subscribe and follow on Twitter and support on Patreon. Buy my t-shirt, blah, 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 blah. Links for all that stuff is down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.